tips for your relationships. 10 minutes. Okay, so this week I want to talk about something that I think, if not all of us, most of us have struggled with in our relationships, and that is unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm. Unrealistic expectations. Wow. First of all, let's talk about what an expectation is, because expectations really are just some beliefs and hopes that we have about something that we're going to get, something we're going to achieve, or even something that someone else is going to be to us or be for us. We come into relationships with these expectations. And everybody has different expectations, of course. We don't all think and feel and do and want the same things. However, we all come into these relationships with these expectations, and sometimes they're not based on what's real or what the truth really is. Even maybe sometimes they're based on some experiences that you've had in other relationships, some experiences that you've had with in growing up in your childhood and your past. And so you come into your relationship thinking that that's how things work everywhere. And that is so far from the truth. But I mean, we're all guilty of it. We all do it because we think that, most families operate the way that our family operated, or most relationships operate that maybe our last relationship operated. But that's not true. So, what happens to us when our expectations, our beliefs, and our hopes that we bring to a relationship, what happens when those things turn unrealistic? What happens? A lot happens. First of all, what does it mean to be unrealistic in your relationship? Well, sometimes that means that we're being impractical. It could mean that we have unreal thoughts and beliefs on how something works or should happen. Sometimes they're impossible expectations, right? Sometimes we're expecting a person to do something that they just can't do. They're incapable of doing that. Sometimes it's romantic thoughts or beliefs or hopes that we have that the other person is going to provide for us. Romantic in the thought of that it's not realistic. And then for the most part, guess what? Sometimes we are just being completely unreasonable. Unreasonable in what we're expecting from that other person in our relationship, right? Let me say this. I can remember first getting married, or when we first got married almost 35 years ago. And I grew up in a home where my mom worked, and we had certain duties. Everybody had a chore, everybody had something they had to do. And in my husband's family, his mom was a stay-at-home mom, which is an amazing thing. But he didn't have certain expectations or certain chores that he had to do, not the same ones we had to do. And so when we got married, hey, I was expecting brother to do all kinds of things that he was not even considering doing, because he was not, those weren't expectations for him in his home, but they were expectations that I had for him. Okay. So we came into that thing all wrong, thinking that, hey, I'm expecting you to do this. And then he had expectations for me too. He had expectations, things that he saw his mom do, and he expected me to do these things. So we'll talk a bit about that later. But what are unrealistic expectations in our relationships? Well, let's just think about a few of them. And these are just really minor things. First of all, sometimes we think that marriage is easy, right? It looks so like it's so much fun. Couples show up, and they're all lovey-dovey and holding hands, and it makes us think that, oh, marriage is fun. It can be fun. It really can be fun. We can make it fun. But the realistic point about it is that it's work 24/7. You're always going to work. You're always going to work in marriage. And when you stop working is when you cease to have a realistic relationship, because you always have to be in a work mode when it comes to your marriage, your relationship. Okay, one other unrealistic expectation is that your relationship, your marriage is going to be 50-50. Ha, not even. It's not going to be 50-50. There are going to be times when you show up with only 20% to give, and that other person has to come up with that 80, and vice versa. So that's unrealistic. Marriage is not going to be 50-50. I mean, not even financially. You know, everybody is making different money, or some folks are making a little bit of money or no money, and we all have to come together and make that thing work, right? Okay. Another unrealistic expectation is that my mate is going to know how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking without me communicating that. Not so. Your mate will not know what you're thinking, what you're feeling without you saying. Okay? You have to speak up. You have to communicate that. That's not going to happen. And ladies, sometimes we're a little guilty of that. You know, we have our little tudes and we're expecting him to read our minds. No, your mate is not a mind reader. Nobody's a mind reader. So no, that's an unrealistic expectation that your mate is going to know how you feel or what you're thinking without you telling them. Got to speak up. Okay, here's one. My mate, my boo, my honey, my baby is responsible for my happiness. No, you better figure out how to get happy on your own. Figure out, reach down inside yourself to figure out where your happiness should come from, your joy, your peace, all those things that you should have for yourself. Yes, it's not up to our mate to make us happy. It's up to them to help us continue in our happiness. Yes, they should bring something to the table of happiness, but it's not their duty to make you happy. You are an individual. You have to figure out what makes you happy. Okay, so yes, there are, and I want to say this too, there are some realistic expectations that we should have in our relationships, right? We should expect our mates to be honest, to be loyal, to be truthful, to be respectful, to have fidelity. You know, all those things, those are not unrealistic expectations, but sometimes you got to work at that stuff. Sometimes it just does not come automatic, okay? Sometimes those expectations that we have, that we should have in our relationship, they don't just come automatic. We have to work at that. So what we should expect is we should expect to communicate about those things, and we should expect to always be in work mode, right? We should always expect to be in work mode. That's our job, to be in work mode, because you're never going to stop working in your relationship. You're never going to stop. The thing about unrealistic expectations in the relationship is that they are rigid, meaning that they don't leave you room for change or flexibility, right? So when you have unrealistic thoughts, or you have these rules that you've made up, right? Unrealistic expectation, these rules that we've come up with that we're expecting everybody else to live by. No, that's unrealistic. That's not always going to happen. Sometimes we get stuck in a fantasy mode, thinking that our marriage and our relationship should be a certain way. When no, it's not going to always be that way. It's not what you see on TV, boo. I'm sorry, it's not. We should not get stuck in our unrealistic expectations. You got to work at this stuff, okay? You got to stop having those rules that only you are trying to live by. Maybe the other person is not. Then I want you to do this last thing. I want you to think about the effect that your unrealistic expectations is having on your relationship. So my question to you is, how is that working for you? Probably not so good, right? Come on, open up, be workable, be flexible. Flexibility means you are sensitive to change. Be sensitive to change. Be sensitive to change yourself. These are my 10 tips.